Warning, the following program is extremely janky. Viewer discretion is advised.
You wouldn't go to a restaurant and expect to say, hey, this is how I want you to make the dough for the pizza. Yeah. And it's like, well, no, you're going to like it. And I know what you're asking for, but I'm not following your instructions because that's burnt dough. That's not what you want. And so people just go, oh, well, how hard could it be, right? Like you just slapdash that together. But if you ask them, okay, well, how does your fucking putting the widget into the other widget work at your fucking burger flipping factory you work at, right? And they'll be like, oh, it's a lot more complicated than you think, buddy.
Hey, Oliver, what are you writing about? Don't worry about it. Yeah. You wouldn't like it. Hey, how tall are you again? Cletus, how tall are you again?
Like he's saying people shouldn't be on welfare because that's lazy, and he's saying that work is soul crushing. It's like, well, what the should I do? Yeah. So you're in line at Subway.
No, you go to Quiznos now.
Yeah, that place.
I'm not like Cletus. I'm built different. I'm 5'11" and a half. I don't even know what I'm fucking saying at this point.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm like, no, I'm lost. I've got no response to that.
I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I like it. Keep it up.
Squishing your head. You know that Kids in the Hall bit?
Oh, yeah. Do I ever know that Kids in the Hall bit?
Panic? I mean, I'm only crushing your heads. Crush you.
Were they as big in America as they were here?
I sincerely doubt it. Kids in the Hall? I mean, I'd be thrilled to learn that they were.
Yeah. Well, it's surprising. I mean, I guess things aren't... It seems like Canadian culture actually can penetrate more effectively often because of the emergence of this technology. Like, Trailer Park Boys...
Yeah, Trailer Park Boys is probably pretty damn popular in the U.S.
It is.
Which is funny because I bet there's a lot of stuff on Trailer Park Boys that Americans just don't even understand.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's probably a lot of, like, very, like, Western Canada references in there.
Well, it's not Western Canada. It's from Nova Scotia.
Right, Eastern Canada, sorry. Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, go for a rip, bud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. No, but the thing is you can tell that it's, like, sort of like this... for lack of a better term, like sort of a trailer trash vernacular. Yeah. And it's also a foreign trailer trash vernacular, so it kind of makes it almost exotic. I'm like, oh, what exactly is a hash coin?
Okay, Aaron. I sent you just now on Discord. I sent you 2 headlines. I would have sent you one, but I sent you 2 headlines. I think they go really nice to each other. Those are for my topic. You can read those out when you get them.
Developers believe Baldur's Gate 3 shouldn't be, quote, raised standard for RPGs. This is not a new baseline for RPGs. This is an anomaly.
Okay, now read the next one.
Larian Studios CEO responds to raised standards concerns. Standards die every day. In video games, there's so much free space to explore still in the creative tree.
So what do you think right off the hop with those 2 headlines? Standards die every day. Is that not a badass way to put that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If I were to compare it to something, it reminds me of a conversation I had close to the beginning of the pandemic, like 6 months in. This guy, I would imagine he's probably gone way down the fucking conspiracy rabbit hole, God willing, not so much. But he was, raising some alarms at that point before people were really polarized, right? And he was saying, I think Trudeau or something had said the new normal. People are like, what? A new normal? There can't be a new normal.
Wait a minute. 3 words that are all capitalized in my head. It's a conspiracy. Yeah. It's an agenda. The Great Reset.
And so what I said to him, I was like, well, new normal. Like I kind of went into the etymology. I'm like, well, normal comes from norms, and we develop new norms with respect to things. And he wasn't really familiar with the term norms. He was kind of like, oh, I didn't really think about it like that. Like, yeah, we do actually, like, standards, norms. Right? These are basically synonyms.
Yeah.
They evolve, they change. They're not they die every day.
They die every day. So, okay, let me get into this a little bit because this is a pretty interesting topic. There's this game that recently came out called Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate is a part of the Dungeons and Dragons lore. One of the, I think they're called planes in Dungeons and Dragons, maybe not universes. I don't know. Citation needed on that one. But there's been a Baldur's Gate games in the past, and this game's been in development for a long time. A lot of people are like, really wait. This is almost like the Half-Life 3 of Baldur's Gate, basically, where it's like, give me the game already. Like, it's been a long time. And it finally came out, and it's received just stellar like applause, basically, from every corner of the internet. It's the peak, the Steam peak actually when the weekend it came out was 815,000 players concurrently, which is crazy. And this past weekend, they actually surpassed it. They got 875,000 concurrent players, which is crazy because you would expect your opening weekend is your big one. But the opening weekend was big, and then people caught onto the hype, and then the next weekend was bigger, that doesn't happen too often. Like, I think maybe Elden Ring it might have happened to. It's happened to this game. It does not happen often. It's an anomaly.
Certainly, you wouldn't see that in the box office.
No, yeah, you wouldn't see.
Opening weekend is always the big weekend.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't be like, lots of people saw Oppenheimer and thought it was really good, so then even more people went the next weekend because presumably the people who saw it the first weekend they're fucked off, right? They watched it. They're not gonna come watch it again next weekend. But the people who played Baldur's Gate all weekend when it came out, they're gonna play it the next weekend too. So it happens with video games, not often, but it happens for really good games.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're still playing it, right?
Yeah.
So they recommend it to people, and then like some portion of those people play, and like they're still playing. So it's like it's you would think it's more common than it is. It's not super common, but yeah, with a really good game and really good word of mouth like this, it does happen. So the drama surrounding this is the first headline. There were some game developers who I don't want to say spoke out because it makes it sound like it's like this, activist type thing. But they, basically tweeted about this saying they didn't want gamers to think that Baldur's Gate 3 was going to be the new sort of standard for what to expect from an RPG game. And as you might expect, a lot of gamers were like, what are you talking about? This game's amazing. This should be the standard. All games should be this good. Like, it's shipped. There's no DLC. There's no microtransactions. The game, it's not broken on launch. Like, it runs really well. It's a good game. It respects the player's time, respects, the player as not as just like a money box where you sell $20 skins like every other game. But players were understandably upset about this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this should be the standard. So I'll read you a tweet, for example. This tweet is from James Berg, who I believe works at Xbox, I think. But he says, I would not be surprised if this was more dev effort than the next 2 or 3 games in the genre combined. It's Rockstar level nonsense for scope. Only a few studio groups could even try this. I cannot wait to play, but this kind of effort likely won't be replicated this decade. I'll read just one more just to sell the point. This guy, Ryan McCabe, who has his own studio, I can't remember what it's called. We'll throw it up on the screen. But he's referring to another person who has a thread about this saying, this shouldn't be the race standard. And he says, this is a great thread about why using a singular game to set expectations for everyone developing titles in a genre isn't useful and is instead foolhardy. So I have a lot to say about this, as you might expect. I think I have a unique perspective here because I am a hardcore gamer. Like, as if you consider how much time the average person who plays video games spends on video games, I'm probably in the very high end of that. And I'm also a software developer. So I know I haven't developed any video games, but I've developed products and I know what it's like to be on the other side of a product. So I think I have a pretty unique perspective on this. And I think that both parties have made some pretty egregious mistakes in the course of this dialogue happening. So I'll start with the developers. I start with what mistakes I think the game developers have made. I think that there's a miscommunication about what players mean and what developers mean when they say a standard, right? This is a very common thing in more in IT than computer science, but there's this concept of the XY problem. Have I told you about the XY problem before?
No, you have not.
It's basically the idea in more of like an IT environment is like a user says, I want to use X to do Y. And then when you assess their problem, you say, well, what you really want is Y. You don't actually, like, X is not the best way to do that. Or X is not actually the thing you want. Like if somebody says, help me, I want to be able to, look at the last 3 characters of a file name and then do something with that because I'm looking for Excel files, whatever. And then the actual solution is, well, you don't want to look at the last 3 characters of the file name. You want to know what the file extension is, because sometimes it won't be XLS, it'll be XLSX, or it'll be DocX. Like sometimes they're 4-letter extensions. So it's this idea of the user asks for something to solve their problem, and you recognize that their problem is not the thing that they're asking for. So this is kind of like that, because what the developers are saying is this shouldn't be the new standard for this set of characteristics. And what the gamers are saying is this should be the new standard for this other set of characteristics. So the gamers, for example, are saying, like, you know, there's no microtransactions. There's no battle pass. There's no, you know, like currency, in-game currency to buy, or $20 skins to sell me. The game is finished. The game is polished. It runs well. It's like, it knows what it's trying to be, and it is that thing. Like, all of these things are the gamers are saying this should be a standard. And I agree with that. And I actually think probably most of the game developers would also agree with that. But the problem is I don't think that's what the developers are actually talking about. I think what they're actually saying is, if you look at the breadth of content, if you look at the amount of time spent on attention to detail, if you look at the scope of what the game actually is, it's I don't think they're necessarily arguing against the quality. I think they're arguing against the quantity. Like, I think they're saying that like that one guy said specifically Rockstar level. Like, if you think of the last 3 Rockstar games, Red Dead 2, massive. Grand Theft Auto 5, massive. Like,
and I was gonna say Doom, but that's Bethesda. I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean,
one thing I'll say too is it is also qualitative, but the nature of it qualitatively is different. Even that is something distinct from what the consumer is talking about. The consumer is saying, well, you should abide by these generalized standards in regards to no loot boxes. There is no effort involved in not including a loot box. It's simply a institutional decision not to engage in a practice, versus the qualitative improvements that are actually we're talking about that are not always achievable, or like, look at the level of art. They spent $50 million on art for this.
Yeah.
That is not feasible to put into every fucking title.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's very much like, that's why I think, and maybe I'm trying to interpret everything that's being said in good faith here. What I'm interpreting is I think that there's a huge misconnection there, where it's like, developers not realizing what the consumer actually wants. And that's problematic for its own reasons. Like, you know, you should understand, even if you're just an accessibility manager, or if you're just like one particular, a character art person or a sound designer, like you should have some semblance of an idea of what the consumer wants, even if that's given to you from the person above you or someone else in your team, in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
I think that one of the issues here is that there's this disconnect. You're describing a communication disconnect, and part of it, an analogy I kind of heard in my mind was, you go to a restaurant, especially a restaurant that's like high cuisine, like French cooking or something like that, and you're like, I want something that's sweet but savory but this. You have an idea of what your aspirational in terms of flavor is, right? But you don't say, hey, I want you to, when you make the beef bourguignon, like the chef knows, oh, you want those flavors? I know how to create that through this complex process that you don't understand. You don't realize I need to use the wine and the butter in this manner and blah, 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 blah. Those are all kind of technical details that exist. And so you wouldn't go to a restaurant and expect to say, hey, this is how I want you to make the dough for the pizza. Yeah. And it's like, well, no, you're going to like it. And I know what you're asking for, but I'm not following your instructions because that's burnt dough. That's not what you want. That isn't what you want. And it will not work that way. And this becomes even more complex because it's a virtual space. So it's like, people don't realize even what's going on. The way I might put it, in the real world, we say, oh, I want you to move this object from here to here. Right? It's like, okay, somebody's got to physically move that object. That may or may not be more complicated than one says, but it's that. Yeah. But I want to move an object, or I want to do something in a video game, isn't actually moving an object. It's engaging in an operation. The person has no idea about what's going on. So there's almost this man behind the it's a field. And so coming back to, I think that developers have an idea of what people want often, not always, but often, because often they themselves are often game consumers, right?
Yeah.
And this is their profession. But there's a disconnect between the jargon, the technical jargon, and the way of looking at things as a expert, and then you're just some brain dead 15-year-old on Twitter saying, "But the fucking sugar in the dough," you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Right? Like, no, like there's a phrase on the internet. I think it's "let him cook." Right?
Yeah, don't let him cook. Do
No,
not.
No, let the developer cook.
Yeah, don't let the 15-year-old telling you put more eggs in the dough.
Yeah.
He can get the fuck out of the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly.
He does not belong there.
Exactly. He should be waiting patiently at his table. And when that doesn't mean that he doesn't know when his food is burnt.
Yeah.
That's where he is the expert, but he's not the expert in the kitchen. He's the expert in the dining room.
There's an amazing quote. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's from a game designer. His name is Mark Rosewater. He's currently the head designer at Magic the Gathering. He's been a designer there for really, really long time. And he did this talk, this GDC talk on design and like the 20 lessons I've learned in 20 years of Magic. And one of the things that he says is the players, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but he says, the players are really, really good at identifying problems and really, really bad at identifying solutions. So you need to trust your players to tell you when something's wrong,
but don't
do what they tell you to do. Because they know if something doesn't feel good, if something doesn't play right, they know. They're the consumer. It's for them. They know. But if they tell you to do it a certain way, you can't just follow that because you're not giving them it's XY. It's an XY problem. You're not actually giving them what they want. Because they don't understand the nuance of everything involved, right? So
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to. It's a perfect example is in cinema, right? Where it's like when you're watching a movie and if all the lighting was fucked up and someone didn't know what they were doing and the editing's all fucked up, you can see you're like, this is a jank ass shit movie, right? Like it will be clear. We know what a AAA film is supposed to look like. But if it was jank, I wouldn't go up to the average cinema consumer and say, okay, so how then do I set up the lights? Tell me how to set up the lights for this shot. Well, they don't know. They just know it's bad lighting.
Yeah.
But they're not going to know, just like they'll tell you to do something that will have no connection to the actual process because they know what is right in the outcome. You know, like another example is in music. Anyone can hear when something's discordant or fucked up sounding. Yeah. It's like, okay, so then let the audience fucking write the orchestra, right? Like that's not how it works.
Yeah. This is a big thing in digital effects too. Like I watch these guys Corridor Digital on YouTube and they review shots from movies. Sometimes they review really jank ass shots from like the late 90s and like the late 80s and stuff where it's like, you know, it's like the pioneering edge of computer graphics and it's like just starting to use this stuff. So of course, 30 years later, it looks like dog shit, but they review stuff and they'll break it down and they'll explain why it's jank. They'll explain, cause you as a user, you as somebody who is not a digital effects artist will look at it and be like, yeah, this looks stupid today. Like, why does it look so stupid? And they'll break it down and they'll say, the reason this looks like it's bad is because the shadow on the person doesn't match the shadow in the background. And so the motion doesn't look real to your eye. Or the lighting on the hand doesn't match the lighting on the CGI bear that the girl is petting. So it doesn't look like she's actually touching anything because the lighting doesn't match. So your eye knows that it's not real. It's like all these little things where it's like you as a consumer can't articulate why, but you know that something is off. You just know, like you just feel it, you know? And I think that's a lesson that is really hard to learn as a designer of any kind. I mean, like I quoted Mark Rosewater, like this guy did, you know, his presentation on like the top 20 things he learned his entire career of 20 years. And this made the list. So clearly it's important, like at least to his knowledge. Right. So I think that's a big part of what's happening in this dialogue, if you can call it that, is that the developers who are talking, they're not clear enough. They're not making it obvious what they're talking about when they say standards, because it's an ambiguous term. So yeah, I think that's one of the first problems I noticed with all this talk about Baldur's Gate 3.
I guess for me too. I mean, my perspective too is just again going back to the 15-year-old on Twitter. I just think about like the nature of online discourse and how like the dumbest takes kind of float to the top just by nature of them. And like, it's very much like it would be like, you know, we talk about the problem of like creating policy to the lowest common denominator. I don't know if you've ever heard of that problem, but it's kind of like, you know, like we got to, but you know, I don't know, like what a good example might be like, oh, we got to go put bumpers on this thing where you think, well, why would there be a problem with this? But dumb fucking assholes bang into this object all the time because they're fucking idiots, right? And then so social media is like that, except for ideas, where it's kind of like, okay, the biggest like, and like more people than you would imagine are, you know, going to be like instantly, rather than being like, oh, I'm going to sit here and, you know, have a 10-second thought, as you would say, and actually consider this and go, oh, maybe this isn't as simple as that. They'll go, yeah, right. Like that's kind of what the space is, right? Like, it's, yeah, right. And if you give it 1 second of thought, you say, oh, okay, I kind of get it now, right? But that's not how smashing a like button works. You don't spend 10 seconds going, do I or do I not smash that motherfucking like button, right? You just smash that motherfucking like button.
By the way, smash that motherfucking like button if you can. Yeah, you're totally right.
Another thing that pops up in my mind is people just not appreciating the amount of work that goes into doing basically anything, right?
Yeah.
People, if they're not involved in a process and aren't thinking about it critically, or even if they are, but it's just they don't have enough underlying information, we flatten and simplify things that are actually far more complex and take a lot more work. And so, and I think that that's becoming like, I see it a lot in the policy space and the politics space where we say, oh, well, why don't they just do X, Y, and Z? And it's like, well, that doesn't understand how political capacity works and whether or not that's actually feasible within a particular political context, right? That's just saying, well, someone said to do it, and I, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not considering the system in which it's operating and what it actually entails in doing it. So a perfect example of this is like, well, how much time do you think people spend doing arts and what it entails? It entails a lot for very small amounts. And then how much art do you think is really going on? A lot more art than you realize, because especially in like in this context, like video games, like the amount of art is staggering. Required to produce.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
And so people just go, oh, well, how hard could it be, right? Like you just fucking slapdash that shit together. But if you ask them, okay, well, how does your fucking putting the widget into the other widget work at your fucking burger flipping factory you work at, right? And they'll be like, oh, it's a lot more complicated than you think,
hey,
buddy.
What do you say about my burger flipping factory?
Right?
True, yeah.
So it's like, because we live in an era of specialization. So we just can't. I mean, it's almost a inevitable result of human cognition that we flatten and simplify things that we just don't have information about. Yeah. And so again, on the social media platform, that sort of thinking rises to the top. But it's funny because like stuff like this reminds me of how important human talent and human performance is in the actual outcomes that we get. Like it's not just like the hundreds of millions of dollars it takes to produce one of these games, of which it costs hundreds of millions of dollars. I think that's the key thing that people should consider is like, okay, let's just think about man hours and computing resources and all these other things that are necessary to fulfill this. What is the dollar value of that? Okay, finance that. All RPGs should be that. Okay, finance that. Yeah. You need to actually place that economically somehow, right? We kind of have this thing. Okay, coming back to the AI shit. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but it's like people think you can just kind of like, oh, AI is just going to produce these cool images that are just perfect for the market or something. It's like, no, we're nowhere near that.
No, they're going to be videos about shooting up a Popeyes. Stupid fucking guy.
And like they have use, but their use is only as good as the human operator that's using it and integrating it into a broader system and has to do a bunch of other things to even get utility out of that tool, right? But people think things just kind of generate themselves. That's why we see so many get-rich-quick schemes, right? Because what is a get-rich-quick scheme? It's, I'm too fucking lazy to figure out how to get rich. Not that you could just figure out how to get rich, but it's like they think, oh, there's like a couple techniques and I can just be a lazy prick and I'll just fall into something. And that's how people think about basically everything. And we started this show, we had thoughts kind of similar to that. We're like, oh, let's just slapdash something together. They're like, oh, this is more complex than we realized because we weren't on the ground.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Oh, it turns out it's actually jank as hell to not have sound baffling behind you.
Yeah.
Or it's actually really fucking jank as hell to only have one camera. And like, oh, yeah.
I'm just going to take a little second to crack my Canada Dry here. Sure. That'll either make the cut or it won't.
Yeah. We'll find out, I guess.
Probably won't.
Yeah, probably not. Especially if I just like rip a huge burp into the mic right now. Just I don't have one locked in, but
I'm locked in. I don't got one in the chamber.
I think a mistake that the gamers are making in this case is misunderstanding the fact that this is in the consumer's best interest, actually. Like it is that like if once we reconcile the problem of miscommunicating what they're talking about when they say standards, that it's not about polish, it's not about, not monetizing microtransactions, it's not about all this other kind of messed up stuff. It's that it's about the quantity and like the amount of money and effort and man hours. Once we reconcile that difference, I think that gamers are misunderstanding that you actually don't want this to be the norm. Like you don't want that, because then you're not going to get, your vampire.
You're gonna wait every
Survivors
15 years for a game to come out?
Yeah. You're not gonna get these little indie games that are really, really good on really small budgets. Like nobody. Like I think that's the problem. Like that's why I go back to the statement of saying like Rockstar level insanity is that like, a game doesn't need to be Red Dead Redemption 2 to be a really good RPG. Just the same as that a game doesn't need to be Baldur's Gate 3 to be a really good RPG, right? Like you can have a really good RPG that comes out that is polished, that doesn't have like abusive microtransactions, that is a really quality product that came from like 12 people. And maybe it has a little bit less content. Maybe it's not fully voice acted. Maybe it's got, lower poly art. Maybe it's not in Unreal Engine 5 and every fucking model is like photo scan from reality. Like, there's going to be things that don't happen, but you can still have a really great product. So this is in the consumer's best interest. Like you don't actually want this to be the expectation of every game, of every RPG. At least once you've reconciled the difference in what we're talking about.
I think we see a sort of a similar kind of thing happening. We see that Marvel movies are having more and more trouble getting people out to the theater. And they're not making nearly as much money. And then we saw Barbie and Oppenheimer come out, and they blow things. So it's like, actually, people do want to see movies, right? But the market was getting saturated with these AAA, like great graphics. Oh, wow, bah, 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 right? But that isn't the only thing you go to the cinema for. Yeah. And if that's all there is, guess what? You're going to be like, fuck Marvel.
Yeah.
Like most of us have been getting to that point. Hence why Marvel is not earning as much money, right?
I think another really interesting thing about this game that I haven't mentioned yet, which I think should be a standard, or should at least should be considered for a standard for games in general, is that Baldur's Gate 3 shipped with no DRM. So DRM is like digital rights management. It's basically you can get this kind of add-on software that you plug into your game, and then when you ship your game, it has some portion of it that's basically functions as a anti-piracy measure. So it might communicate with some server online. It might, monitor the files of the game in real time to make sure that they're not tampered with or manipulated, or, all sorts of different things that it might do. And intuitively you might think, oh, good, like piracy bad. Lol. Like, yeah, of course, anti-piracy good. But the problem is that there's been some pretty damaging comparisons done between versions of games that have their DRM enabled and versions that have it disabled, pirated copies, basically. Performance comparisons, and
the pirated versions are
they run better, dude. Like the pirated versions run better. It's nutty. It's wild. Like literally, you grab a copy of a game off Steam and then a copy off of the pirate website.
Which is not something you should do.
Definitely not. I support
complete theoretical.
Yeah, hypothetically speaking, if you for some reason you were just base as hell. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. Don't pirate stuff. Pirating sucks. Like don't pirate. But if you run them side by side and the pirated copy runs faster on the same machine, it's got a higher average frame rate. It's like, and it's not just an isolated incident. This is something that's repeatedly happening, and so the average gamer is starting to pick up on it. It's not just the software dev nerds who are being like, yes, DRM. Like, it's the average gamer who's being like, yeah, fuck de nouveau, yeah.
Back in the day, they used to have things I don't know if you've played it. You remember the Ultima series of games? You might
Oh,
have
yeah.
heard of it. It's like one of these sort of seminal RPGs.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
everything else is based on Ultima, really. But yeah, they used to have a thing for Ultima 7 where it'd be like you'd have to have the manual where it's like, oh, what is the latitude and longitude of Skara Brae?
Yeah, I remember.
And then later on, like I remember for SimCity 4, which I loved, Rush Hour Edition, I think it was, which is like that was like I haven't played a city building game since then because they like pared them down and made them far more simplistic apparently, and I was just like, I will not play these games, right? So I haven't gone past that point in terms of playing games, but they would have like this like 16-digit code on the back of the box, and you ever lost the box, you're just fucking fucked. You're just fucked, right? So
yeah.
So I mean, but I could see like it's those things were actually always the most annoying part of trying to play these games, especially a couple of years. Like I was playing Ultima 7. Ultima 7 came out when we were like born.
Oh yeah, it's
right?
older than us.
Yeah. So I was playing Ultima 7 10 or 15 years after its production, right? Like I was a kid, like a 10-year-old kid playing this game, right? And so I'd have to be like scrolling through like 2003 era fucking forums looking for
Anybody got the 16-digit code on the back of the Ultima 7 box?
Yeah. Well, no, it was worse. It was like literally, it was like they would have latitude and longitude. You actually had to have coordinates of locations in the game, which it was fucking ridiculous. And there'd be like a character, like it's like there's like it's like a tutorial village kind of thing. And in order to get them open the gate, because you investigate this murder. And so in order to get them to open the gate, they're like, all right, we just got to make sure you can get out of the town. What is the latitude and longitude? What the fuck?
Damn it. I didn't even pirate it. I just lost the box. Shit. I mean, I've seen some really, really clever and actually hilarious anti-piracy implementations in games. I think The Witcher 3, I think, actually had some anti-piracy, it's actual code in the game where like something happens to you in the game if you're playing a pirated copy, and it like fucks with your game experience. Like some guy just comes along and he's just like invincible and he just fucking kills you, and you can't kill him because you're playing a pirated copy. And so people post online. It's like oh, you know what?
How do you get past that part?
Yeah. Like the one I'm thinking of is Game Dev Tycoon, where it was like, and this is like, you see the irony already.
Oh,
right?
that's amazing. That's meta as fuck.
In Game Dev Tycoon, yeah, your game would get, eventually you make it to a certain point in the game where your game would get pirated so much that the sales go down and you fail, you lose the game, and people will go post on Reddit and be like, how do I stop the piracy in the game? I keep dying to keep losing to piracy, and it's like, you gotta buy the game, bitch.
That is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. That is fucking insane.
Oh, it's great. And I'm sure there's way more examples of it too, but those are just the two that come to mind. Gabe Newell very famously said that piracy is not a pricing problem, it's a service problem. If piracy is high when service is poor. You know, music piracy was at its height when we didn't have the ability to easily access music digitally. We didn't have, Spotify and YouTube Music and Apple Music. So we used Napster, right? Like, pirating video games is at a historical low because of how easy it is to just open up a launcher, Steam, Battle.net, whatever, and download your game. Now, you could argue that piracy is also low because of the
implementation of anti-piracy measures.
Yeah, or you could also argue that it's low because of the frequency with which games are always online. You know, like you go play Diablo 4, that's an always online game. You have to be online. It's a lot harder to play a pirated copy if you are always online, right? Not impossible, but harder. So there's lots of things that have decreased piracy over the years, but I think a huge part of it is that, yeah, it's just easier to buy games now. It's easier to just pay for the game and get it than it is to download the cracked version and like figure out how to get it's not just putting a CD key into Doom anymore. It's like, well, Doom didn't have CD keys, but you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yes,
like Age of Empires or something, right? It's not just getting a CD key generator and just putting one in. It's more complicated now. Like somebody like me, like I wouldn't do this, but somebody like me with my skill set has to crack the DRM on the game and like figure out how to yank out the DRM and then redistribute this illegally.
You wouldn't steal a car.
You wouldn't download a movie theater. That's not what it is. I can't fucking remember what it is. I would download a car. Like, I mean, not illegally. I'd pay for it, but it'd probably be cheaper than a real car. I don't even know what I'm fucking saying at this point.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm like, nah, I'm lost. I've got no response to
I don't know
that.
where I was going with that.
No, I like it. Keep it up.
Content.
And now, a word from one of our many sponsors.
Fire Sale Books presents 30 Rules to Living Best After Divorce. The newest National Enquirer best-selling list book from suicidal divorce lawyer turned life coach turned right-wing shit poster Bordillo J. Patterson Esquire. BJP is here to tell men they're not alone, that they can embrace their masculinity.
And it's like, if you think big burly men are scary, well, wait until you see what the betas are up to.
Listen to BJP expand on tired truisms.
Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to where someone who went somewhere said.
Get avuncular tips on shaping up and staying true to yourself, based on BJP's professional training.
And it's like, pull your shoulders back, man. Clean your sink, shave your cat. Just, for God's sakes, quit calling your estranged wife or you'll be in breach of the court order.
BJP stands up for the little guy and puts it all on the line, time and time again.
If someone doesn't get these lonely virgins some help, I'm gonna fucking kill myself.
It's these strange Twitter hoaxes laundered in. Some so absurd you can't believe BJP has any education whatsoever.
The commies got robots sucking off dudes in China, and Elon Musk is the only one who can stop it.
Call the number on your screen and buy Bordillo J. Patterson's 30 Rules to Living Best After Divorce. And we'll throw in a 9-disc set chock full of totally normal takes.
This whole pronoun debacle makes Mao Zedong look like Mickey the Mouse, but Disney even turned the bloody rat gay. This gender ideology makes me want to vomit in rage.
Call now. Operators are standing by.
Somebody get me some fucking benzos before I blow my fucking head off here.
Disclaimer. Bordillo J. Patterson Esquire and Fire Sale Books are not affiliated with the Bharatiya Janata Party, nor are they proponents of Hindu ultranationalism. Any physical or behavioral similarity between Narendra Modi and BJP is completely coincidental.
So I'm going to read you this is a tweet from Chris Murphy. He's the Democratic senator from Connecticut, I believe.
Okay.
And he's sharing a song that's gotten big, especially on the conservative end of the political spectrum. It's big on Twitter right now. A lot of people are talking about it. It's a viral sensation.
Okay, so I'm probably going to hate it.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah. So I'll read the tweet from Chris Murphy. A, I think progressives should listen to this, in part because it's just a good tune. B, but also because it shows the path of realignment. Anthony sings about the soullessness of work, shit wages, and the power of the elites. All problems the left has better solutions to than the right. And so I was wondering, just so we can be clear as to the song that Chris Murphy here is saying is just a good tune about some really important stuff, I want you to maybe draw out some of your favorite lyrics from this song.
Sure, yeah. Let me open it up. Rich men north of Richmond. I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bullshit pay. Bro, relatable. Let's go. Off to a good start. Living in the new world with an old soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control. Okay? Want to know what you think, want to know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do. That probably plays a lot better on the actual song. I'm like having an aneurysm reading it off the page here.
It's catchy when you listen to it.
I wish that can't be real. These are the actual lyrics.
These are the
I wish politicians would look out for minors and not just minors on an island somewhere.
Yeah.
This is on the radio. Like, the people are.
I don't know if it's on the radio, but it's somewhere.
Sheesh.
It's circulating.
Lord, we got folks in the street ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. What?
Just keep going, because it only gets better.
Oh, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bags of fudge rounds. What is going on? This is a fever dream.
Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground because all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down.
Is bullying good or bad? What is happening? Do I bully or do I not bully?
There's a lot of things to draw out of this, for sure.
Like he says, like He says, we got folks on the street, ain't got nothing to eat, and the obese milking welfare. Like, am I pro welfare? Is welfare good or bad? What are you talking about? Do I give, like, what?
Let's talk about a little bit of political context, right? Because especially this whole welfare stuff, which is like, yeah, it's very much, I mean, there's a couple of things going on. I'm sorry. There's so much running through my mind. But the first thing that comes up is, this rhetoric that was really big in the 80s and 90s about quote unquote welfare queens and people who would go in there, cashing 60 checks and driving a Cadillac and blah, blah, blah. I think Ronald Reagan ran on that to a degree. And it was like, people in the inner city are taking advantage of welfare.
Yes, inner city.
Yes.
Very coded language.
Yes, there. And so that's this is kind of an outward edge of that sort of same sort of culture. It's funny because as those are the most over the top, absurd and insulting lyrics. Like I find
well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not pay for your bags of fudge rounds.
Good rendition,
right? But the other parts of it are actually the more insidious sort of stuff. Like that stuff is like, we can just laugh it off right off the bat. That's the part that I find amazing about this is that you have a Democratic senator saying, firstly, the islands thing. He's calling you a file, dude.
Yeah,
he's calling you a file.
Yeah, like you're a politician. Like what?
Like he's talking about you. He's not talking about you like, I have some measured criticisms of the policies of Chris Murphy, saying, no, Chris Murphy
is on an island with little boys.
Yeah.
He's like,
that's literally what he's saying. And he says stuff like, because your dollar ain't shit and it's taxed to no end because of rich men north of Richmond. And it's like, okay, so the dollar ain't shit thing, that's like gold bug nonsense. Like actually, let's look at what the Forex right now, the dollar is probably like, compared to other global currencies, at one of its most stable points in the last 15 years. Like the ruble is currently crashing, right? Like the people, this is these are just outcroppings of random grievances from conspiracy theories that don't even really relate to the world. And then Chris Murphy is like saying, hey, maybe if we gave more tax cuts to small businesses so that they could create more jobs in this thing, people wouldn't be, this has nothing to do with, that's a great idea. Yeah, let's do economic work. This has nothing to do with the economy. This has nothing to do with him working. This has got to do with imaginary 5'3" fucking
300-pound people eating fudge rounds on their welfare check.
Yeah, like it's literally like, get off the internet, buddy. Like touch grass.
Hey! Get off the fucking internet!
It's like this guy, he's this bluegrass guy, needs to go find some
Touch
bluegrass.
Some green grass.
Yeah, some green grass, yeah. Like it's who are you mad at? Like, is it rich men or are the rich men the 5'3" guys that are 300 pounds?
They're rich off welfare. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
talking about the you made a really good point about how he says simultaneously, he says, taxes ought not to pay for your fudge round. So he's saying, hey, you fatty, you're fucking shit. And then the next line he says, young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground because all this damn country does is keep on kicking them down. And this is where he's basically creating a line between people like me, who come from a similar cultural context, who I have sympathy for, and are just must be being oppressed by something. And there are lots of people are alienated for like really good reasons, but they're cultural reasons primarily. I would argue economically, things are actually not that bad. And yet people are making claims that it's terrible. There'll be these 2-question surveys where it says, tell us what you think of the economy, and people overwhelmingly say it's bad, and tell me what you think of and then they ask, okay, and how are you doing economically? Oh, I'm doing fine. Like I just got a raise and blah, blah, blah. Like they have a couple gripes about certain costs, but for the most part, there's a massive disconnect between what people are actually saying they're experiencing and what they think everyone else is experiencing and what's going on in the world around them. And it's like this guy, it's ironic because this guy is probably a guy who's like the damn media. This guy lives inside a media bubble. Like, what are you talking about? You're just angry at people you're making up in your head to be mad at. Some 5'3" eating fudge rounds. Like, not only that, but it's like he's not pointing to any real problems. He's just saying, and people are putting themselves in the ground over this. Like, over what? Over the conspiracy theories you're sharing and the fact that there's some chubby dudes eating fudge? Like, tell us why. Like, there's no content. There's no social commentary. It's just airing a series of grievances. And I think that's the part that really kind of drives me the most nuts. People have gotten to this point, and it's funny because this line of thinking is now, we traditionally associated with the left, but it's like really like rooted itself in the minds of the right. And I think has always been there to a degree. This idea that the subjective experiences that people report having, we should just take at face value. We should just say, oh, okay. Like this guy says, like they're mad about the economy. Like I've seen people show the statistics I'm talking about the economy and how people feel about it. And then people comment, including like, right-wing cultural and political commentators will say, well, you're just disregarding how people feel and we need to trust how people feel. And it's like, well, but people are creating their beliefs within like particular media environments, which we all identify the problems with social media in our own ways, even though we're disagreeing what it looks like exactly. We see that actually a lot of these ideas are percolating from people just living in these kinds of echo chambers. And we shouldn't just accept, oh, everyone's subjective experience must be, it's like this sort of like standpoint kind of theory, but it's being utilized on the right to say, oh, yeah, like the reason we're mad are real reasons. How? Why? Well, because I feel mad. What do you feel mad about? Don't question that I'm mad. And it's like, okay, like let's establish what we're fucking talking about. I see people seeing these things where it's like, oh, because disproportionately red states are being beneficiary of Biden, but in this thing where green technology is getting funding. And so they're building a bunch of shit and building factories for like solar panels and stuff like that, right? And so they'll go and talk to people in a red state and they'll be like, yeah, I'm really glad for these tax benefits. Like it's really helping us. We're building industry. We're getting jobs going, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll say, oh, okay, so yeah, this was from Joe Biden. Oh. And then suddenly have a problem with the policy.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm kind of having trouble trusting your sense of what is or is not important at this point because and then Chris Murphy, I see what he's trying to do. He's doing it totally wrong, and frankly, I mean, there's a number of reasons why I think he's a fucking goof. Okay, but in this case, he's like, the irony is everyone's framing this through economic terms. Again, sort of a left-wing conceptualization. Conservatives historically think about, oh, we need organic community. Right? That's what was missing. Not we need inequality as a problem. But this guy's singing about the inequality being the cause of the problem, not about anything about the community. But the community is the issue he's talking about. The reason people are themselves is the lack of community. The reason they're themselves is because of despair. They're not because they're poorer than they've ever been. People are, broadly speaking, pretty well off in American society, economically speaking. We see that there's a major disconnect between economic suffering and the alienation that all of these people are experiencing. And yet we insist, oh, it must be something to do with jobs. Oh, it must be something to do with, there must be some way we can spend money or build a social program that is like, we deliver these benefits. And all those things are important. We need social programs. Like, I'm not against, I don't even care if the occasional 5'3" guy buys a bag of fudge rounds. Like he's welcome to. That stimulates the economy. Go ahead. Yeah. I'll point out that's a source of calories. I'd rather he do that than spend it on
VLTs.
Yeah, Vilts, exactly. Well, Vilts, it goes right back to the government. So maybe do the Vilts too. Okay, that's fine.
At least here it does. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how it works down north of Richmond, south of Richmond.
Wherever this guy lives, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's we
I keep thinking Richmond, BC. That's all I can think of. So I'm like south of Richmond's like that's like what? Like what's south of Richmond?
Burnaby?
Like, right. What? Okay. Like what's north of Richmond? Like
I think what's north of Richmond is the Fraser River. And then there's whatsoever is on the other side of the river. Or maybe it crosses both sides of the river. But
it's just like
I feel like Richmond's on the south side of the river.
Well, the terminology in my head just there's no meaning to it because I don't understand the geography of what he's talking about. Like so it's like I'm just hearing Richmond, BC, and I'm just like that. What is it? You've said nothing. Like,
well, that's the thing too.
Canada's a very horizontal country.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of like north-south separation in our country. Like we do because we have like the territories up north and provinces are all kind of in a line south of that. So,
yeah.
Like it definitely exists, but it's
predominantly politically it's an east-west thing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like east of Winnipeg. Or actually they'd probably say
east of Brandon or something like that because they'd include us in the east. You know, Westerners don't accept us and Easterners don't accept us. Right in the middle here. But yeah, no, it's grievance. It's crybaby shit. I'm sorry. Like it's like he's simultaneously saying, okay, so we need more services for people that are like me who are being kicked down. Won't tell me how they're being kicked down other than, oh, it's shitty having to work, which I get. I don't like work. But half the time these guys are like he's saying people shouldn't be on welfare because that's lazy. And he's saying that work is soul crushing. It's like, well, what the fuck should I do? Where do I go from here, buddy?
Yeah, we're too much taxes, but help the coal miners.
Yeah,
it's like, well, how? With what? With money from? Come on, you can do it. Like, come on, you're almost.
It's like
there.
when you hear like an anarchist or a libertarian say like we shouldn't have a police force. Oh, how do we enforce? You know, make sure people don't engage in, and then they just construct a police force, a theoretical police force. Like, that's a police force. Oh no, it's something different, right? It's like, no, buddy, like you don't have any answers in this. It's actually a series of contradictory asks. It's just, and then we're supposed to take this seriously, and it's not even connected to anything. Like it is connected to a couple things. Like again, I want to go back to the line, which is important. Young men are putting themselves 6 feet in the ground. He is pointing on the fact that there is grievance and meaningful grievance and alienation going on in our society.
Yeah.
But I guess my argument here, he has no idea where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of us, I think it's actually an emergent issue that is quite complex and requires thought.
Yeah, you can't just douse for it. Like it's not like, it's like a person in a field holding 2 sticks being like, the problem's over there, guys. It's like, no, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Like there is a problem, sure. Yes, absolutely. But what do you mean? Like you don't. You're contradicting yourself even within 2 sentences of each other. Like,
but I think I don't want to lean completely into the race thing, but if you think about it, even just the phrase north of Richmond, like it's like you may as well be saying on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line. You know what I mean? Like, who are you talking about there? Like the guys in the blue uniforms? Like I'm just imagining him with the little cap and the gray uniform, man. Like. People don't know how to work hard and they're dying because they work too much. Like, okay, give me a fucking break. But yeah, no, there is alienation, but this is not where the alienation is coming from. And I can't take for granted. People are becoming almost, one of the big issues is people are actually becoming less articulate about the nature of their own problems, which speaks to the source of the alienation.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that we're having both of these topics today because this is also an XY problem, if you think about it.
Very much so. Like very much so.
It's definitely an XY problem. It's like Y is the problem, and like X is the problem causing my Y. But it's like, no, X is not the problem. Like
it's not fudge rounds.
It's not it's not home eating fudge rounds on the couch, Also, like 5'3", who cares, man? It's short kings. Like
yes.
Doesn't matter if he's 5'3".
Well, because
I'm 5'11" and I'm 300 pounds. He probably would be mad at me eating fudge rounds too. My height's got nothing to do with it if I'm 300 pounds.
Well, the point is the shorter you are at the same weight, the fatter you are.
Yeah,
so
I think my argument is you cross a threshold. You cross a threshold at some point where it's like, me being 8 inches shorter is not going to make, you know what I mean? It's like,
right. I think what he's trying to do is maximize how fat this person is.
Yeah, true.
He doesn't want to.
Not only are you 300 pounds, you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds.
Yeah.
You fucker. Give me the fudge rounds.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, why didn't he say you're 6'1" and 450?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah, because that guy's probably playing for the fucking Cowboys. He's probably on the O-line.
Well, that guy probably works with him. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I don't understand too, is like, we look at this, like the construction here is like there's these urban liberals who are stealing for us hardworking ruralites, these conservative ruralites who are working super hard. It's like, well, let's look at this obesity statistics and let's see how that lines up, buddy. Because guess what? You're the chunkos. My thickness, blah, 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 blah. You're fat. Y'all are fat. That's okay. I don't got a problem with it. It's you yelling about the fat people, not me. I don't care. I think it's like, but yeah, I like this. I really like this framing you use, this XY problem, right?
Yeah.
I've been writing some things I probably won't be ready to publish anytime soon, but it's in regards to all of these, how technology and how these systems in our modern lives are resulting in widespread alienation. And the alienation,
there are young men putting themselves 6 feet in the ground. And more significantly, the biggest, I mean, granted, he could be a grifter, but I would even say that still indicates that it's the case because other people are buying it. But the real indication of the alienation is the fact that he's feeling all these things. Like he is having all these big feelings inside of him. That's what this is really all about. And that's okay, actually. It's important. He needs to address that. He needs to see that. He needs to, and there are reasons he feels alienated that relate to problems in our society that we're all experiencing and need to address. But yeah, coming down on us short kangs ain't the way to fucking do that shit.
Yeah.
Stay away from my fudge rounds.
Also, come on. Half the people listening to this song are probably sitting on the couch eating fudge rounds.
Buddy.
Anyway. Like, based. True. I'm not true.
No, that's exactly
I'm
it.
eating fudge rounds making fun of him. So.
Right? Like, I bet, I'd be curious, and I'll look it up and I'll throw it up on the thing, but I'd be curious to see, like, the average weight of listeners of given genres. And I have a feeling.
But the point you're making is, like, I want to make sure this is abundantly clear for the listeners that you're not saying that's a problem. Like, you're not saying, like.
No, I'm not saying that's a problem.
Murk the fatties.
I'm
like,
just saying he's making people up.
Yeah.
I'm saying he's getting mad at a guy he made up in his own fucking head. And that's fucking dorky as shit. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's just like, why are these particular characteristics just drawn out into this archetype of this person? Like the fudge rounds. It's like, oh, what rhymes with 300 pounds? Fudge rounds. Fucking fudge rounds.
As if he didn't just look around the room. He's like, oh, there we go.
You know what? That's exactly it. He was in a room with his buddy in the room with you right now.
What are you
He's
writing?
the lyrics. He's looking at his fucking cousin or his nephew or some shit. He's that fucking short fuck.
Hey, Oliver, what are you writing about? Don't worry about it. You wouldn't like it.
You're not interested. Fudge eating.
Hey, how tall are you again? Cletus, how tall are you again? Oh man. Yeah, it's just like a very thinly veiled like criticism of his personal relative. It's not even about any of the shit we've talked about. It's just his cousin Cletus. He's like 5'3", 300 fucking pounds. Like,
welfare fraud.
Yeah.
But I mean, that speaks to it too. One last thing in terms of that, not seeing the irony of this. If you look at the statistics of where welfare is received and who's receiving it and who is putting the most taxes in, blue cities where wealth is generated are the ones that are paying the taxes that are going to welfare that are disproportionately going to the countryside. And that's actually okay. I'm not
good.
against that. That's a good
It's
thing.
not just okay, that's good. That's
good.
Desirable.
But then he's reversing it and being like, there's some invisible force in the city taking my hard-earned welfare taxes away. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's always like, we need to cut the food stamps, and then the food stamps get cut. It's like, well, why can't I get my food stamps? Like shit like that. Really, man. Like, I just think give Cletus the food stamps. I ain't gonna judge him on the fudge rounds.
Yeah, W Cletus.
W Cletus, W fudge rounds.
I just looked up fudge rounds, and these things look delicious, man. I cannot get mad at Cletus for this. Have you seen it? Look up fudge rounds.
I'm doing it right now.
These things look amazing. I want a fudge.
What if it's like a fudge round is actually like a fucking delicacy that's only eaten within like 100-kilometer radius of his house?
Yeah.
So it's like the only people he could be talking about are his neighbors.
I thought you were gonna say it was like a very like specific cultural dish, and he's just being like really racist.
Oh, no.
Like if it was like a very specific like Manitoba Ukrainian dessert,
Yeah,
and he's
exactly.
just like eating their Vina Tarta or something. That's like Icelandic,
eating their pierogies, all these pierogi eating bastards taking my money.
Wait a minute, this is a little bit.
This is fucked. Yeah, they look
Little
pretty
Debbie's
good.
fudge rounds.
Yeah, they're
they
Little
look,
Debbie products.
They look tasty, man. I might get some of those. No, I don't want to. I don't want to contribute to the problem. I'm not on welfare, but I don't have. Now I just feel bad buying fudge rounds. Yeah. Now I feel like the fudge rounds are the problem. What's going on?
I'll write him a
Oliver?
letter. I'll have you know, I bought these fudge rounds with my own hard-earned money.
I earned these fudge rounds, Oliver.
In the coal mine.
I'm not like Cletus. I'm built different.
I'm
5'11" and a half. Well over 300 pounds.
I'm a medium height king, okay?
Okay, so I got a nice little nice fun one to end on here. I'm going to send this to you. I'm going to get you to read this headline, and then we'll get into it. Okay, I just sent it to you. Go ahead.
Subway says nearly 10,000 people have offered to legally change their names to Subway to get free sandwiches for life.
The winner will receive money to reimburse legal and processing costs to complete the name change process.
Now, I know what you're thinking. This is not fun. This is sad.
It's very sad.
But if you kind of eliminate the weird dystopian terror in the back of your head for this situation, just appreciate the comedy of it, I think it's a pretty funny thing. 10,000 people, like over 10,000 or nearly 10,000 people.
What I don't understand is how do you determine the winner? Like, is there this guy changed his name the best.
I don't even
This
know.
guy changed his name, but he changed it in a place called Ham Sandwich. So he got it.
Ham Sandwich, like North Dakota or something like that. I would not be surprised if there was a place in the U.S. called Ham Sandwich.
There's all sorts of fucking places.
Here, I'm going to pull up the article here.
I was actually going to say Hamtramck at first because that's actually, I think, a town in Pennsylvania or something like that. This guy was in Hamtramck, but I didn't think it would translate well.
So I'll read this segment from the article. Subway announced Tuesday that nearly 10,000 people said they would legally change their names to Subway to receive free sandwiches for life from the quick serve chain, and that they did so within 96 hours of the original offers being unveiled last month. So people heard this and were like, Monday, I'm going to the courthouse. I'm getting me some free sandwiches. One winner will be selected this month, Subways. Wait a minute. One winner will be selected. Does that mean 10,000 people already changed their names? And they're going to pick one? And then the other 9,999 are going to just be called Subway for no reason?
Yeah. Did you win, though? It's like, hey, did you know I changed my name to Subway to get free? So you're in line at Subway.
No, you go to Quiznos now.
Yeah, fuck that place.
Oh, my God.
Well, what I also wonder is, like, I hope this is something that, like, local governments make money on and don't lose money on, right? Like, you imagine you're, like, at a locality where it's like, all right, we just had to change 60 people's names to fucking Subway. It costs our department $50,000.
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, it's a good point because if you're in if one person hears about it in a town, and they it's like a small town, and they go to the the LC or whatever the equivalent is in the U.S., like some beer store or whatever, or grocery store, I guess, and they show their ID, and it's like, Cletus, did you change your name to Subway? And then it's like, that's a good idea. I think I might try that too. I'm not doing the accent just to be rude to Southern people. I mean, we already got Cletus, so you might as well keep him around for the bit, right? Yeah, I really like that idea of like the guy who changed his name to Subway and like didn't win the contest, but just doesn't change it back. It's like, this is
Well,
my
I don't
life
think
now.
you should be able to change it so rapidly. That should be like a fucking password change or some shit, or like, okay, wait 30 days before you change your fucking screen name. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you imagine you're
gonna be Subway for the rest of the month, buddy.
like this is like one of these things where it's like, I mean, it's not like it'd be like, oh hey, we're having a new special over at Burger King. Fucking don't pay your hydro bill for a month. Okay, it's like, why are you interfering with the fucking workings of government for this? Like,
yeah,
like I feel like Subway should get a little flack from localities being like, we're not changing people's names and we're fucking like fuck off, Subway, you fucking assholes. Like,
yeah.
Never mind the people. Fuck the people. They're the idiot who's willing to change the name to fucking Subway. Like,
yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, Subway's just actively causing a drain on the government for no fucking reason.
For an ad campaign. That's like, there's got to be something illegal.
Maybe it's
about
like
that.
10,000 people, but still, like, that's a lot of people.
Well, it's like birth certificates, fucking health, health
driver's
cards,
license, health
driver's
card,
licenses. Yeah.
home insurance, like your title, maybe.
Yeah,
like.
exactly. Yeah. Like it's just like, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to keep all of Grandma's estate in trust because about 30 years ago, she changed her name to Subway and the will still has her other old legal name. So it's like, oh, fuck. The government foreclosed on our fucking multi-generational house because Grandma changed her name to Subway in the fucking 20s.
It also
we were
says,
living in the 20s, by the way. I wanted that to be clear.
It also says change your names to Subway. Does that mean you become Subway, like the Mario Brothers? Like your brother be Quizno Subway, you be Subway. And that was a pretty funny last topic to end on. So I think that's a good place for us to call it. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to do all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. We're here every Friday. If you have any questions, critiques, or citations that we desperately needed, please leave them in the comments below, and we will see you next time. Adios.
Welcome to the fucking podcast.